Late one night, Zachary was jolted awake by a strange noise coming from his backyard. Trusting his instincts, he checked the live feed from his outdoor security camera, expecting to see a wild animal or perhaps a swaying tree branch. Instead, the sight on the screen made his heart pound. Bears were dancing around a fire in his yard. Grabbing his phone, Zachary frantically dialed the police. His hands trembled as the line connected. "Good evening, this is Officer Samuels. How can I assist you?" The voice on the other end asked. Zachary breathed a brief sigh of relief before blurting out, "Officer, I know this sounds crazy, but there are bears dancing in my backyard." A long silence followed, filling Zachary with doubt. "Hello? Are you still there?" he asked, just as Officer Samuels stifled a laugh. "Did you say bears are dancing in your garden?" the officer asked, barely suppressing his amusement. "Yes, they're dancing around a fire. I have footage to prove it," Zachary insisted. But the officer's laughter broke through, shattering his hope. Angry and humiliated, Zachary slammed down the phone. He couldn't even blame them for not believing him. Determined to see for himself, Zachary crept to the window and peeked outside. The live scene was even more disturbing than the footage. 10 bears, moving in eerie synchronization around the fire. Zachary watched, frozen with fear, unable to tear his gaze away. As the firelight flickered, he saw them abruptly stop and turn, their dark eyes locking onto his. His breath hitched. The bears began moving toward the house, their steps deliberate and menacing. Zachary bolted from the window, heart racing, locking himself in his bedroom. Whatever was happening, it was beyond comprehension, leaving him terrified and alone. After a while, they stopped dancing and sat down on logs placed around the fire. They just sat like that for some time, and then something unexpected happened that almost made Zachary scream with fear. The bears, all 10 of them, suddenly turned around and looked him right in the eyes. They looked at him. Zachary held his breath once again and was unable to move. The bears all got up from the logs and took a few steps in his direction. Instantly, the fear came rushing back, and he jumped up from his chair, running back to his bedroom and locking the door behind him. This couldn't be happening. Yet there he was, wide awake in the dead of night, heart pounding in his chest. The reality of the situation was as hard to digest as the idea of it being a dream. Back on the phone, Zachary's voice cracked, desperation seeping into every word. "Please, you've got to believe me. It's not a joke." But the cool dismissal he received in return felt like a slap. The officer's warning of potential fines for misuse of emergency services was the last thing Zachary wanted to hear, leaving him feeling more isolated than ever. He hung up, defeated. Frustration swelled within him as the officer's words echoed in his mind. Pranks? Fines? Was there no end to this night's madness? Returning to his post by the window, Zachary found the backyard transformed. The bears were gone, leaving behind the fire, which now seemed to burn with an almost sinister glow. The quiet was unsettling. Had they really been there? Zachary's sleep was anything but peaceful. Waking up felt like emerging from a deep, dark pool. The sunlight streaming through the window did little to dispel the heaviness of the night's events. The morning light was a balm, making fears seem like mere phantoms. As the day unfolded, Zachary found himself caught up in the familiar whirl of life. The evening brought with it a chance for redemption. As the night wore on and the laughter died down, the memory of dancing bears became like a story from someone else's life. As dawn crept through the curtains, casting a soft glow into the room, Zachary's resolve solidified. He grabbed his phone, fingers hovering before tapping out a message to his closest friends. He needed their help but didn't want to seem crazy, so he left out the bewildering details of the previous night. The uncertainty of how they would respond weighed on him, but he hit send. The message now floated in the digital ether. One by one, the replies trickled in, each friend voicing their support, their words a mix of concern and curiosity. That evening, as his friends arrived, the atmosphere in Zachary's living room shifted from tension to camaraderie. Zachary waited, the weight of his story pressing on his shoulders until the last friend stepped through the door. With everyone settled, Zachary stood, the room hushed in anticipation. "Thank you for coming," he began. "What I'm about to share might sound out there. Explaining this won't do it justice," Zachary admitted, moving to his laptop. His hands were steady as he opened it, a silent invitation for his friends to gather around. The screen flickered to life, the cursor blinking like a beacon. "I'm going to show you," he said, a decision made. His fingers flew over the keyboard searching, but the video that was supposed to prove everything seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Zachary's frustration grew with every passing second, the absence of the footage gnawing at him. Had it been deleted, or worse, had he imagined it all? Despite the setback, Zachary turned to face his friends, the urgency clear in his voice. "Listen, I know how this sounds, but you have to believe me," he implored, his eyes scanning theirs for any sign of skepticism. He recounted every detail of the encounter, his narrative painting a vivid picture of the surreal events. The room was still, his friends absorbing the gravity of his words. As Zachary's story unfolded, their expressions transformed from casual curiosity to something deeper, more contemplative. There was no laughter, no disbelief, only a shared sense of wonder and concern. With the story told, Zachary made his request. "Stay with me tonight. You'll see them, the bears, with your own eyes." The plea hung in the air, a mix of hope and anxiety. To his relief, his friends nodded their agreement, a lifeline thrown into the darkness of doubt. The laughter faded as the reality of their situation settled in, replaced by a focused seriousness. They were ready, or as ready as they could ever be. The strategy was to catch some sleep before the expected encounter, but the atmosphere was charged with too much anticipation for rest. Peering out into the velvet darkness, Zachary's gaze locked onto the moving shadows that had become hauntingly familiar. The sight of the bears, once a source of dread, now sparked a defiant fire within him. The emptiness echoed his shock and disbelief. Where had they gone? The plan had been clear, and their roles had been set. The realization that he was alone, as allies had inexplicably disappeared, sent a wave of dread crashing over him. Driven by a mix of fear and urgency, Zachary raced through the house, each room's emptiness amplifying his despair. His friends and support had vanished, leaving him to face the looming threat alone. The truth hit Zachary with the force of a physical blow. His friends, the ones who had promised to stand by him, were out there, possibly inches from danger. Zachary burst into the backyard, his breath catching at the sight before him. One of his friends stood frozen, encircled by the towering dark figures of the bears. This was a moment Zachary had dreaded yet never truly imagined would come to pass. With no time to hesitate, Zachary's adrenaline kicked into overdrive. His plan, designed for many, now rested solely on his shoulders. Clutching a pan in one hand and a portable speaker in the other, he launched into action. Zachary charged forward, his every instinct focused on breaking through to his friend. Despite the chaos, Zachary unleashed the noise, but the bears showed a surprising resilience. Their numbers seemed to swell in the darkness, an intimidating force that no amount of noise or bravado seemed to diminish. Zachary realized the scale of the challenge he faced. He was one against many, and it might not pan out how he originally hoped. As Zachary braced for another charge, the tumultuous night air suddenly stilled. The chaos halted as if paused by an unseen hand. The bears, moments ago a formidable presence, seemed to crumble where they stood, confusing Zachary further. The once terrifying creatures twisted into shapes he couldn't believe were real. As Zachary's heart began pounding in his chest, the confusion that clouded his mind cleared in an instant, giving way to sheer astonishment. As the figures began to stir, the outlines of the bear suits became unmistakable, and one by one, his friends emerged, laughter spilling from within the costumes. The reality of the situation dawned on him. The menacing bears were nothing more than fabric and fluff, a prank orchestrated by those he trusted most. The moment of realization struck Zachary with the force of a thunderclap, leaving him speechless. What he had feared, what had tormented him, was all an elaborate joke. Relief washed over him, mingling with the remnants of fear as the absurdity of the situation set in. The threat had never been real. It was only a ruse crafted with meticulous care to fool him. As the bear heads were removed, revealing the grinning faces of his comrades, the air filled with laughter. Zachary's initial shock gave way to disbelief, then to amusement as the reality of the prank sank in. There, under the night sky and surrounded by friends disguised as his fears, Zachary found himself laughing along. The tension of the night dissolved into the absurdity of the moment. The elaborate deception, rooted in a past joke taken too far, stirred a whirlwind of emotions in Zachary. Betrayal flickered briefly, overshadowed by the overwhelming relief that the nightmare was over. As laughter filled the room, Zachary's fear and anger gave way to camaraderie. What had begun as a nightmare transformed into a memorable prank, a testament to his friend's creativity and dedication. The intricate planning, erasure of the video, and flawless execution left Zachary torn between annoyance and admiration. Relief quickly replaced frustration as he appreciated the lengths they had gone for the joke. Their commitment sparked his competitive streak, and while he joined in the shared laughter, a playful promise of payback lingered. This prank, now part of their shared history, ensured the cycle of jokes and camaraderie would continue.